This weekend, I had a tweet that somewhat went viral, and I mentioned that a basketball mind that I respect brought up an interesting point about Emoni Bates. He mentioned that if Emoni Bates spent the last 2 years at overtime, he believes that he could be a projected top 10 pick. Well, in this episode, I have the basketball mind I respect, Rhossi Carron, on, and we're going to elaborate about the conversation that we had a few days ago. Stay tuned to hear more about his thoughts on why Emoni Bates' draft stock would be a lot higher than it is today if he went to overtime, and why he is such a fan of overtime elite and their setup. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to and faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. Hopefully everybody had a good Super Bowl weekend. I'm a basketball guy, so I slept through most of the Super Bowl. Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs. But I am Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board and the founder of NBA Draft Junkies. And my guest today, and this has been in the works for a little under a year. We met at the Combine last year in Chicago. It is Rhossi Carron. He is a man that wears many hats. He's the founder of U Sports. He started off in grassroots basketball. He has a sports management company, does marketing, does media, and he is the man behind the comment or the tweet about Emoni Bates and the overtime elite. So, Rhossi, how is everything going? And can you give the audience a little bit about your background, so that way they'll understand why I say you are a basketball mind that I respect?
What's going on, Rafael? I appreciate you having me on, man. I'm excited to talk hoops with you. Uh, Rhossi Carron here. I spent 15 years in grassroots basketball. I started a basketball skill development company that ultimately evolved into a grassroots program called Basketball University. So spent 15 years in that space. Our program played on the Adidas circuit, and was able to work with a lot of high level guys that went on to play at the collegiate level, and a couple that have gone on to put their feet on the court in the NBA game. So I'm excited to be here, excited to talk hoops, and excited to kind of talk a little bit about grassroots, NBA draft, overtime elite, and Emoni Bates, that about that tweet that you started that firestorm with.
Yeah, so I'll be honest, man. I had no idea it was going to do the numbers that it did. Last I looked at, over like 100,000 impressions, a lot of dialogue, and of course with Twitter, you only get a certain amount of characters, and you can't really elaborate on it. So I'll read the tweet again. And the exact words are: a basketball mind I respect brought up an interesting point regarding Emoni Bates. He asked, how much differently would Emoni be viewed if he spent the last 2 years developing that overtime? He believes Emoni would be a projected top 10 pick if he took the overtime elite route. And then I asked for thoughts. So I'll just read the first question that came up. And it says, and it's from a guy, Jeff Peterson. He says, if that is true, what is the lesson? Is he a top 10 pick right now? No. Why? Because he hasn't played himself into the top 10. So either this person is saying he would have developed more at overtime elite, or we have to take players from overtime elite with a grain of salt. So you are saying that he would have developed more at overtime elite. So can you elaborate on why you believe he would have developed more?
I don't know necessarily if he would have developed more, but I think that when you're a top tier guy, and you've seen this with the draft, a lot of being drafted, and we're only talking about guys that are good enough. Okay, so I'm not talking about some mythical guy who's not a good player, not good enough to play at the next level. He's good enough to play at the next level, but a lot of it is about momentum, and I think that he had unbelievable momentum. He was one of the guys that he was the number one player in the class, and he was talked about to be one of the next greats. And I think sometime if you put yourself in position to be exposed too early, and college basketball is a place that can expose you. One, if you look at the transfer portal, like college basketball is old now,
Yeah.
so it's not a place for young guys. I think reclassing up, I think puts guys in a tough spot, because think about a draft class. You only have to be good enough to be um, one of the top guys in your draft class. You don't have to be better than the four classes behind you or the three classes in front of you. And I think with the momentum he had, if he had stayed in high school or had gone to overtime elite where he could have stayed with his class, continued to develop size and strength, I think that he would, some of the challenges that he experienced in college, I think he wouldn't have been exposed to those things, which would have given him time to develop, people to see him amongst his peers. And I still think he would be a top 10 pick at this particular time.
You brought up a good point about the age difference. I have a couple friends that have kids that are playing Division I basketball, and they're like, my son is 18. He has teammates that are 23,
It's crazy.
24,
Correct.
and they're just like their sons are they're not playing because they're not good enough. It's just so much pressure to win right now in college basketball that the coaches are preferring grad transfers or transfer that already have some experience. And I think we kind of get it confused because we only see like the top 10, 20 freshmen, and we don't understand, like, if you're not one of those guys, then more than likely you're behind somebody that is 22, 23. So how much, and I guess I already know the answer to this question, but how much do you think him being 17 playing? I mean, he had a teammate at Memphis last year that was like 25.
The teammate that's 25 is DeAndre Williams. He's from Houston.
Houston,
I
yeah.
watched DeAndre play all the way through grassroots. And what I'm saying is, at that particular junction in his development, he had no business being on the court with a 25-year-old at that particular time. You see what I'm saying? Like, and again, I'm big on, you see it all the time, momentum. He had all of the momentum behind him. He stays in high school. He's a McDonald's All-American. He's Jordan brand. Um, I just think that momentum would have carried him um, into a different space. And I think him going there, 17 years old, thin frame, playing against grown men. I think that ultimately he put himself in position to be viewed in a negative light. And once people see it, it's hard to unsee it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So if he had gone to, let's say he would have spent his last year in high school, I think that would have helped him. Even if he had spent his senior year in high school, rolled that momentum, continued to develop, add weight, add size, add strength, add experience, and gone to college, I think he would have been better served. If he had gone to finish his last year of high school and then go into overtime where he would have been playing amongst his peers, I think he would have been right there in the mix with the Thompson twins. Obviously, I think the Thompson twins are the third, fourth, fifth pick, but I think somewhere right behind them, he would be in the mix to fall. So I think sometimes you can take your product out the oven a little too early, and I think that's what ultimately hurt him. And he's
Yeah.
climbing his way out of it though. He's playing well. He's playing really well.
Yeah, he's playing
That's
well.
great too.
And unfortunately, the day that the tweet came out, he shot 2 for 17, which,
That didn't
before
help.
that he had been cooking. But the thing you said about momentum is so true. And I've seen it from two different sides, right? So I won't mention the player's name, but a few years back, there was a guy who went to a Power 5 school, had a very nice stretch.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a guy that coached him in AAU that ended up being a scout for NBA team. And the guy that coached him knew the kid's weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, he's going to trick NBA teams. On one hand, if he stays in school, he's going to get exposed. If he leaves now because his momentum is hot, he's going to get drafted. He's going to be a first round pick, and he's going to be able to, he may not stick, but he's going to give himself an opportunity to stick. And he's going to secure, at that time, it was probably like $6 million guaranteed.
That's a different life. So check this out.
Mhm.
One of the things about the draft that I believe is, if it's possible, you want to come through the front door. So for instance, if he had played another year in high school and even gone to college one year or gone to overtime, like you said, some of his weaknesses wouldn't be exposed, but it would have been a 2-year gap. You know what I'm saying? That's 24 months for him to work on some of those weaknesses. Once you go to the draft and you a top 10 pick, the team has a vested interest in seeing you succeed.
Yep.
So even if you have some shortcomings or you have some areas you want to work on, they want to help you improve those areas. One, because they believe in your talent if they draft you that high. And two, they don't want to look like they made a mistake. So they're going to give you opportunities where if you come to college early, you get a little exposed. And again, I keep saying credit to him for rebounding and kind of putting himself back in the mix to be drafted. But when you're a top 10 pick, they want to see you have success. And again, the only reason we're having this conversation is because I think he's good enough, not because you can trick somebody when you're not good enough. But you definitely want to come through the front door and have the resources, the support of the organization that drafts you. When you're a second round guy, it's an uphill battle. Doesn't mean you can't make it, but you can't play the same way either. And the
Yep.
way he plays, I think it would better serve him to have been a top 10 pick.
All right. When we return, we're definitely going to elaborate a little bit more. We're going to talk about why you are such a big fan of overtime. But before we get into that, I want to talk to all the small business owners or hiring managers about LinkedIn Jobs, because your success in 2023, of course, is going to depend on the team members that you surround yourself with. And that's why LinkedIn Jobs is the best place, because you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people that have the skills, values, and the experience to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you attract the qualified candidates to your jobs with their targeting tools. They go beyond the resume data by using insights from your job post and company, and they have 875 million member profiles that you can put your job in front of. You can identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs, and you can connect with them fast and, more importantly, for free. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, and you can do this all in one platform, which is why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. So LinkedIn Jobs, again, helps you find qualified candidates that you want to talk to, and you can reach them faster. So if you're a small business owner and you're looking for help, or you're looking for employees, post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That is linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, once again, you are listening to the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. This is your host, Rafael Barlowe with Rhossi Carron, and we had a very interesting conversation in the first segment about momentum going into the draft and Emoni Bates. But one of the, I guess, the main points of discussion or dialogue this weekend based off the tweet was Rhossi mentioned that overtime elite would have helped Emoni Bates maintain that momentum. And a lot of people took it the wrong way. And of course, with Twitter, you only get a certain amount of characters. And honestly, I was going to a meeting and I typed it. And then by the midway through the meeting, my phone was just going off.
Blowing
and
up.
Then by the time I finished the meeting, I mean, my Twitter was like plus 99 comments or something like that. And I was trying to reply to them. And one of the things that I saw was a lot of people took it as a slight against overtime, and they used it as they used the tweet in your comment as their way of devaluing the Thompson twins. So some people was like, well, this is why I wouldn't trust the Thompson twins, because if Emoni Bates is a top 10 pick, that just shows you how weak that overtime is. And so I tried to elaborate, say, no, that wasn't the case. You were saying that you were a fan of overtime's development. But of course, by that time, the momentum, speaking of momentum, the tweet,
The momentum got you.
yeah, it got me. So can you explain why you are a believer in overtime elite? Because I think there's a huge misconception about overtime elite. And of course, it's new. So it doesn't have, the crazy history of college basketball, even the Ignite. I mean, this is year 3. They've had lottery picks in their first 2 years, and they're obviously going to have a top 2 pick this year. The overtime is new, and then I think there's some people that are kind of saying, well, last year nobody got drafted, so it must not be good. So explain why you believe in overtime.
Well, one, to clarify that tweet, I'm a huge fan of overtime. I'm also a huge fan of G League Ignite. I think that those alternative programs they're not for every kid. I think they're for specific kids, but I think that they give the kids the opportunity. And I've spent a lot of time at overtime. And most of the time, when I hear people criticize overtime, I always ask them, "Have you been there?" And they say, "No, they haven't seen it."
Yep.
I think it's an unbelievable training environment. So when I walked in there, I was amazed because it looks like basically an NBA organization kind of shrunk down, a mini NBA organization from the performance training to skill development to the full-time chef and nutrition and strength and conditioning, and they get a chance to spend so much time working on their craft. And for those select few guys that go to overtime, and I'm assuming G League Ignite is the same way, you get the opportunity not just to compete against guys that are on the same path that you are on, but you have more free time to devote to your craft. And I think it's for the right kid, I think overtime elite is an unbelievable opportunity. I'm a huge fan of overtime.
So someone brought up the question and about development, and they were like, well, the Thompson twins haven't developed. And so I disagreed because my point was, how many people knew the Thompson twins before they got to overtime?
There you go.
They weren't. I mean, when they signed with overtime, it wasn't a huge splash at the time.
People
John
were
Montero was
asking.
their
People
guy.
were asking who are those twins when they first signed with overtime.
Yeah.
Yeah, like right before they signed with overtime, they were just kind of being identified as kind of top tier high major prospects. I know a few college coaches that were recruiting them at that particular time, and they looked at those guys. They thought they could be really good, but they weren't like, hey, these guys are no brainers coming in starting from day one. Going to be college All Americans. If you go back to the game film when the Thompson twins first started, not this past November, but the November before, those early games, that's not the Thompson twins you see today. Those guys are on another level, man. And they, obviously they're incredible world-class athletes, but they've improved. And most of the guys there that I've put my eyes on there at overtime have improved. I mean, if you're in the gym a few hours, 4 or 5 hours a day, and you don't have to, think about a regular high school schedule, right? You spent 8 hours in high school in class, right? You got a 50-minute, 45-minute athletic period. And typically during the off season, you can't come after school and practice. So the only time you have to develop
for whatever.
Gym is being used for other things, and you can't officially practice. You can't practice until a certain day, based on the UIL rules. Well, at overtime, them guys are spending, 2 or 3 hours in the gym, plus time in the weight room, plus watching film, plus they're practicing. I mean, I just think that as a guy who started in player development, when you put that much time into your game, you're gonna get better. You have to get better. So I think that if people haven't seen it, I advise you to just go peek your head in there, and I think people are going to be blown away. And I'm not saying this for every kid. I'm not saying, hey, this person should take their kid. I'm just saying that place is high level. It's high level, and I think it's a good opportunity for the right kid.
That makes a lot of sense. And something that you had mentioned in our conversation last week, one, you compared the size. Like if you're in high school, if you're at a regular high school in Texas, California, you may not face 6'11", you may not face people your size or comparable athleticism on a game-to-game basis.
How about a day-to-day basis at overtime? I don't know the whole roster, maybe the 25 or so guys, but I would guess they have 5 or 6 guys that are between 6'10" and 7 foot. I would guess they probably have another 10 guys that are between 6'5" and 6'9". Yeah. So to be able to, that's a huge part of development, is being what I call a hammer and a nail. Some days you outplay your opponent, some days you get your ass kicked. But you have to have that to develop. And I think that in most high school scenarios, if you're a 6'7", 6'8" gifted athlete, you're the best player in practice every day. And you typically end up playing out of position. Because if you're 6'7", especially if you grow early, you 6'7", 6'8" in high school, you playing center.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen guys 6'4" playing center. Yeah. Ghost
Yeah, well,
points.
so to play at the next level, you know, a 6'4" guy is a shooting guard. So, you know, at overtime, if they have 7, 6'10", 7 foot guys, you don't have to play center. You can play your natural position, and you get to again bump and grind against guys that are like size, like skill, like athleticism. And if you spend that much time in the gym, you have to get better. So anybody who's saying that, and you know, I think they haven't peeked their head in there to see what's going on over there.
All right, we have one more segment. When we return, I want to elaborate a little bit more about Overtime Elite and then talk about an event that you'll be hosting at the end of the month. But I want to talk about FanDuel because we are now we're after the midway point of the NBA season. I mean, it's downhill for now. I think there's maybe 27, 28 games left for most teams, some even fewer. But there's still time to download FanDuel, which is America's #1 sports book. And because if you're a new customer, you get a new sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So just download the FanDuel Sports app. It is safe, it is secure, it is super easy to use. You can bet on everything from the money line to the point scores to the threes drained. FanDuel also lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same day parlay. So do not miss a chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to fanduel.com/locked on. That is fanduel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA and Locked On. All right, last segment. And I wanted to touch on this about overtime. So I believe that there are a significant amount of people that see the social media stuff and they may see the highlights of the game and they kind of get it confused with basically glorified AAU. That was basically the knock that I saw a lot coming up. And something that you mentioned to me last week when we talked offline was about overtime is a media company. And I think most people are getting it confused as they're not understanding that it's a media company. Now, in my opinion, I could be totally wrong. I think the social media stuff is needed for overtime to survive because I mean they're paying money. The facilities are nice, even though I haven't been, and they can
No.
monetize.
The facilities are not nice. The facilities are unbelievable.
Okay,
High school facilities are nice. This is different. But
unbelievable.
I agree with your point is that that overtime is a media company. That's how it started. So I think that people have to recognize that there are some aspects of overtime from a media standpoint that they have to do to get clicks, to get likes, to get people engaged, to get conversation. But ultimately, those clicks, those likes, and all those other things that people laugh about are giving kids, a lot of young Black kids, opportunities to be in an incredible environment where they can chase their dream. And I think that's what I'm about, man, is trying to give kids opportunities to go after their dream, whether it's at overtime or G League Ignite or in high school. So I'm a fan of organizations and programs that are helping to elevate kids and help them go after their dreams.
Can you explain the difference between the guys that signed in overtime 2 years ago and last year? I don't think the average person knows that players from overtime can actually play college basketball now. So can you explain the difference?
And again, this is just my interpretation of it. I don't work for overtime or these are all these opinions are my own. But from the way I understand it is that the guys that are signing with overtime now or have the opportunity to sign what's called, like, I guess, an NIL deal, and instead of playing as a professional, they're still playing as amateurs, and they still have the opportunity to be able to go on and play college ball. Whereas I believe that some of the guys that signed initially signed pro contracts, and a few of those guys, and again, I don't know the specifics of it, but some of those guys are not at this time. And again, that can change. Who knows? But are not eligible to play college ball. So, I mean, from that standpoint, you talk about a guy like Emoni Bates again. If he goes to overtime, it's an NIL. He can sign an NIL deal at that time, played against guys his own age, but still like talent, like skill level. The way you view him as a scout and as an evaluator wouldn't be the way you viewed him when you saw him playing against 25-year-old guys in the American Conference. So that's one of the reasons that I'm really a fan of it, is because I think that kids can go there, maintain eligibility, and if they decide to go to college and that's their path, then good for them. But if not, then they can pursue paths of being a professional, NBA or somewhere.
Do you believe that the success of the Thompson twins in the NBA early is going to have the greatest impact on Overtime's future?
I think that the Thompson twins' success will impact people's perception of overtime. But again, if, like I said, if you know basketball and you go in there and peek your head in there, it doesn't even matter what anybody else tell you that haven't been there or don't have a really good eye for for what it's supposed to look like in those environments. And again, my background is player development, so when I went there, that's what I'm looking for. Like, what are they teaching? What are they working on? What things are they working on that's going to translate? Do they have spacing? Do they play with pace? Do they have a shot clock? Like all of those things matter. If you think about high school, especially in Texas, they don't play with a shot clock.
No.
So you can have a possession that lasts 2 minutes. That doesn't prepare you for college.
More. I went to a game to see a kid. Actually, it's a terrible story in a sense. There's a kid that I felt was really, really under the radar, and I made a highlight video for him. And coaches were like, "Why haven't we heard of him?" It was a kid that came from money. He didn't play AAU during the summer because he traveled with his friends and family and all that stuff. And he was putting up like really good numbers. And I sent this video to some coaches, and they were like, "Yo, this kid is good. Like, why have we heard of him?" I was like, "Didn't play summer basketball." So they go to watch him play in a playoff game, and the team they played got up by 8 and held the ball the rest of the game. So he finished with like 8 points and like 5 rebounds, but they held the ball. So
I'm telling you. And so if you think about playing with the shot clock in high school and playing with the NBA 3-point line in high school, and playing with, when you have a shot clock, it increases your pace, which ultimately, if you're really pushing yourself, it increases your conditioning, and it increases your averages because there's more possessions. So I think all of those things play. And again, I'm not saying it's for everybody. Some kids would be better served to stay at their high school. Most kids would, and to go to college route. And there's some kids that they fit that description, should take a look at OT and maybe go to OT and then go to college. But I think there are various avenues, and I don't think one avenue is something that works across the board. But again, when people throw overtime under the bus, I'm saying, man, listen, you got to get on the plane and go open that door and peek your head in there. And I think you're gonna come back with a different thought process about what they're doing over there.
Yeah, I missed their pro day. I had an invitation to the pro day, and I missed it because I was in France to watch Wembanyama play. I came home for like a day. Then I went to Vegas to watch Scoot and Wembanyama play. And then Overtime's pro day was like 2 days later. And I got a little one.
I was there. I was at their pro day.
Yeah, I missed it. I got a little one at home. And at the time I was like, I don't know if I can afford to be gone pretty much a whole week. But I mean, I don't regret spending time with my son, but also I feel like that would have been a really good opportunity to see it up close.
I think they had something like 28 or 27 of the 30 teams there, maybe.
Yep. I heard that too.
In high school, when are you going to play in front of 27 teams?
And I actually heard that some college coaches were a little salty because Overtime's pro day had more teams than theirs, because it was such a weird week that a lot of teams were in Vegas because that the Scoot Wembanyama game came last minute. So a lot of schools had different pro days, and scouts were in Vegas, and then they ended up going to overtime, which kind of left some of the schools behind. But I mean, I'm sure those schools had plenty of representation, or the team.
And they get a chance to see the schools play all throughout the years. And listen, I'm a huge fan of college basketball. Like, college basketball is an amazing experience. Like, the fact, and I think you mentioned this, and one of the things that that gives college a nod is because you get to play in front of 5,000 or 6,000 or 10,000 or 15,000 fans. And that environment is unbelievable. An opportunity to play in the NCAA tournament is something that I think kids grow up, kind of aspiring to be a part of. So again, there's not one set path for anybody. For some people, it's to go to their local high school and go to college. For some, it's to go to G League Ignite if the opportunity presents itself. For some, it's to go to overtime and go to college. For some, it's to go to overtime and then hopefully go to the NBA or another professional path. So
yeah, that's the thing that with college basketball, which is obviously it has the most history, and they do have environments, or they provide environments that the G League, overtime, they can't duplicate. Like you can't simulate Duke Carolina. You can't simulate playing at Lawrence Fieldhouse. You can't simulate the conference tournament or even like Big Monday. So I guess that is the advantage. Yeah. But this year is different. I mean, there's a good chance. I mean, there's a chance that this year the first 3 picks, maybe even 4 out of the first 5 picks, could be outside of that NCAA machine, which is a game changer. So
the other thing, one more thing, another thing that college provides is pressure. Yeah. Because there's the pressure to win so that you can get into the NCAA tournament. Once you're in the NCAA tournament, it's the pressure to win so that you can advance. So there are different elements. There are pros and cons to both, and I think both of them are good opportunities depending on the kid.
And speaking of the overtime elite, Gerald Wilkins is he the president?
Yep, Damian Wilkins.
Damian Wilkins.
Yep, Damian Wilkins is the general manager at OTE, and I'm excited because our Grassroots Hoop Summit 2023 here in Houston, February 26th, he's going to be on one of the panels here to talk about obviously his experience in sports, his experience developing guys there, and then also to talk about just the overall state of grassroots and opportunities that kids have that we didn't have 10, 15, 20 years ago.
5 years ago.
5 years ago. And somebody else who's going to be on the panel there is Rafael Barlowe.
Yeah,
he's going to be at Grassroots Hoop Summit.
And Kendrick Perkins.
Kendrick, yep. So Paul Biancardi is a guest speaker there. Eric Bossi will be there. Obviously, you will be there. Jim Hicks, Marcus Sloan, Tyler Ralph, who's a player development guy who I have a lot of respect for. So I'm excited about it, man. We're going to talk hoops. We're going to talk player development, NIL, mental health, social media, marketing, state of grassroots, scouting, so all of those things I'm really excited about. And the panel that you're on, recruiting, scouting, and rankings, I'm excited about that. So we can talk about some of the things we talked about Emoni Bates. It's like how much impact of scouting a kid in high school translate to them going off to college and hopefully, becoming a pro.
All right. So what made you decide to put this event together?
So I was in grassroots for 15 years. And when I got out to start sports marketing and media company, U Sports Group, a lot of parents that that still had kids in the grassroots space would call me and say, hey, I need help trying to figure out, the player development piece, or what grassroots team should I play on, or, the recruiting process. Who should I trust? What schools are the best fit for my son? So people for 4 years, people were calling me about that. So I said, well, maybe I should put together something, because obviously the information is needed, that gives parents a platform to get the tools, the resources, the information that they need to navigate the grassroots process. And I'm excited about the guests that we have coming, and I think it's going to be an eye opener for the attendees to learn about how Rafael Barlowe views a high school prospect. How Eric Bossi and Paul Biancardi are 2 of the biggest national media guys in that space. How do they evaluate and rank players? And and we can't talk about athletics and navigating this space without talking about mental health. So Jay Barnett is a big time mental health expert, former football player who tried to commit suicide twice. So he'll be there talking about mental health and how it impacts athletes. And so I'm excited about it, man. Kendrick Perkins will be there. Kendrick Perkins and I go back 20 years. So I'm excited. It's going to be a big time event Sunday, February 26th in Houston, Grassroots Hoop Summit.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And like I said in the opening, you're a man of many hats. And I had a chance to attend one of your events for U Sports Group. It was a game that at the time I did not know how big it was. It was Houston versus St. Mary's. It was in Fort Worth.
At Dickies Arena.
And St. Mary's is a ranked team, but I think they just lost, so they may fall
They
out.
might
But
they might drop out. Yeah, but they had climbed as high as I think 22 or something
yeah,
at one point. Yep, it was a doubleheader. The Battleground 2K. It was at Dickies Arena, and it was Texas A&M versus Boise in the opening game, and the second game was Houston St. Mary's, and
yeah, I
St.
had a
Mary's took Houston down to the wire. I think it was a 4-point game with a minute left.
yeah, and at the time, I didn't understand how good St. Mary's. I didn't understand how good they were.
They're really
And
good.
that, even though if there's a such thing as a quality loss, that's a quality loss because Houston is rolling.
Yeah. And
And
at that
so
time, Houston was the number one team in the country
number one
at
team
that
in the
time.
country, yeah.
Yep.
So I had a chance to watch Jarris Walker, evaluate him live in Sasser, and even St. Mary's has a young freshman that's cooking right now.
Aiden,
he had a really good game against Gonzaga. So like I said, I had a chance to attend one of your events. It was very professional. Obviously you picked a great arena, you had good teams, and so I'm really excited about being on this panel and just the mindset to even put something together like this. I'm a big believer in, we all have these ideas, right? And a lot of people may transfer it from their brain to writing it down on paper or typing it in their phone, but a lot of people don't execute. So big shout out to you for executing and putting on this event. And like I said, I'm looking forward to being there. So I will be in Houston. And if you are in the Houston area, you got to come check it out. It's the Grassroots Summit. Where can they find more information?
So Grassroots Hoop Summit 2023 is February 26th, Sunday, February 26th in Houston, Texas at the Hilton Houston Post Oak. And you can register at grassrootssummit.com, grassrootssummit.com. So looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of great conversations like we had today, but more importantly, it's going to be insight for parents, student athletes, and coaches on how to navigate the process and just to give them some tools that's going to help them as they move forward through this process. And it's Emoni Bates parents, if they had the Grassroots Hoop Summit, you would have stayed in high school another year. You'd be top 10. You'd be top 10 in the country.
Ooh, that's you'd
be top 10 on that mock draft.
That's a lot of millions of dollars that could have been, I guess, saved or made. But anyway, that's a whole different subject. Well, thank you, the listener, for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. Now, for your second listen, you have to check out the Locked On Game to Game podcast, because every moment, every performance, every result, actually every top performance, every result, Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. So follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, this was a great show. Rafael Barlowe, I am the host, and Rhossi Carron just came and just shared his knowledge and background on Grassroots and his thoughts about Emoni Bates and Overtime Elite. Hope everyone had a great day, and we are